Don't pull that up. I'll just quote it. Just go right onto the PowerPoint, if you will. Get that ready. Oh, y'all ready? You can go back. It's all right. We can do it. It's a good thing to do. I apologize. It's my fault. You can stay there. It's all right. Don't. Well, all right. Y'all ready? We declare God's blessings and favor. We declare God's healing and restoration. We declare God's wisdom and direction. We declare God's goodness, grace, and mercy. We declare God's power over every adversary. Amen. Praise God. It's a good thing for hell to hear us saying that and heaven to hear us say that. Amen. We're going to continue our lessons tonight. Tonight's lesson is the first life. This is a preacher received this email. It goes like this. I received an email not long ago from a United States Marine. So I knew this man was no wimp, but he wasn't writing me as a tough guy. He was writing me as a distraught father. He said that his daughter was a top Christian student in her high school. She helped lead the youth group at church and won several scholarships from Christian organizations to redeem at the college of her choice. She decided to go to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and to win the Campus for Christ. She was in her first semester. Her father wrote to me, and I received a call from her after only 4 weeks. Her words devastated me, he said. She said, "Dad, I don't believe in God anymore." What and how can that be? The man said, I got in my car and drove 4 hours that weekend all the way to Chapel Hill, and I sat down with her but got nowhere with her. After only 4 weeks of listening to her atheistic religious professor, and I did say religious professor, she abandoned her long-held beliefs in Christ and adopted an atheistic belief. An exception? Nope. Unfortunately, the majority of young people, surveys show about 75% leave the church after high school, partially because atheism is religiously promoted in college and in culture. And it is a shame that churches just ignore it. It really is. College professors are 5 times more likely to be atheists than the general public. And more than half of college professors have unfavorable views of evangelical students. But how can you blame the professors? They are rightfully unimpressed with the inability of most Christian students to defend their beliefs. In other words, it's not so much that Christian minds are lost at college. It is that Christian minds rarely go to college. They rarely get to college because many parents and churches emphasize emotion and ignore the biblical commands to develop the mind and to know what we believe. Sadly, though, when we lose our kids, all of a sudden we get excited about learning this stuff. When you win people, what you win people with, you win people to. In other words, if you win people with emotion, and us Pentecostals are emotional, and I like emotion. But if you win people with emotion, the world's got emotion. They can leave here and go find emotion somewhere else. If you win them with emotion, you win them to emotion. I'm going to tell you, Hollywood could probably beat us with emotion. Unfortunately, emotions are no match for atheistic college professors who are intent on undermining your beliefs. Facts are necessary. Emotions come and emotions go, but facts never change. They stay the same. If Christians continue, and I hate to say it, but and even in our organization, we need a whole lot more material on this kind of stuff because we have just We're just blind. We're worried about Buddhism and other false doctrines, and the greatest false doctrine that affects all of us in schools is atheism. It's a doctrine. If Christians continue to rely on emotion and ignore evidence, they will continue to lose their children to secularism. The world isn't neutral out there. Today's culture is becoming increasingly anti-Christian. Every day, the media and academia pound out an incessant drumbeat against the Christian faith. Despite the fact that Christians founded most of our major universities to advance Christianity. Matter of fact, Harvard was founded on John 17:3, which it says, I want to know Christ. That's what it was founded on. But it's not that way today. And let me tell you, I'm talking about professors, universities, but they're starting in kindergartens now. Atheism is just assumed to be true at many of these universities and schools today. Matter of fact, it's so assumed to be true that they do not allow any other options to be taught. Belief in God is often mocked or dismissed, even in religious courses. Even in Bible courses in universities and schools, they have atheists teaching those courses. Like, well, that's a New Testament course. I ought to take that. You might not should, because it might be an atheist that's teaching it. And their objective is to undermine that New Testament and destroy your faith. Yet how we live and the destiny of our life ultimately hinges on one question. Does God exist? If God does not exist, then nothing matters. And no one is right and no one is wrong. And whatever you believe is up to you, and there is no consequences for anything. Hitler was not wrong in what he did if God does not exist. And you can do whatever you want and not be wrong. And whatever you think is right if God does not exist. So the need to expose the faults in atheism and provide the evidence for Christian theism has never been greater. And since atheism appears to be growing, it is especially important that we learn the things of creation. Lest we just get together and have an emotional service, which I'm all for, and lose our kids and lose ourselves. Thank God for the emotions, and we ought to be emotional, and we ought to come in church, and we ought to clap our hands, and we ought to dance, and we ought to lift our voice. All these are biblical commands. But at the same time, we ought to have an answer for everyone that asks of the hope that lieth in us. We can go to our slides. The first slide. Spontaneous generation is the doctrine of evolution. That's all right. Spontaneous generation means that life just poof, it just happened somewhere, someday, in some pool somewhere. All of a sudden, two chemicals got together and life came about. That's what's called spontaneous generation. Does that make sense? Is it spontaneous generation or is it a supernatural God? Next slide. God never performed a miracle to convince an atheist because his ordinary works provide sufficient evidence for anybody, Ariel Roth said. What we're going to look at tonight is just what God has done. He doesn't need to do anything great. What he's already done is unbelievable. Next slide. We discussed several weeks ago the cosmologic argument, which is that there is a beginning to the universe. For years under Aristotle, scientists wanted to believe that the universe was eternal because of the law of causality. If there's a beginning, there has to be a beginner. And so they don't want to believe that, they did not want to believe that there was a beginning to the universe, but now they know and they admit that there's a beginning. And that's a good place to meet them in the conversation, is to say, well, you believe in the Big Bang, right? Yes, I believe in the Big Bang. Then you have a beginning. And of course, they'll always say, well, you believe in God. Well, yeah, who made God? God is timeless, spaceless. He's outside of everything that's created. When they're trying to say who made God, they're trying to get you to have a God that was created, but we have a God who was not created. But we have the cosmological argument, and that is there is a beginning. All these are powerful arguments, and they're cumulative. As you learn more and more of these things, you become more resilient in your ability to witness and to help people who are struggling with their faith. You got the teleological argument we talked about last week, the amazing, extreme fine-tuning of the universe, how gravity is perfect where it's at, and how carbon dioxide is perfect where it's at, and oxygen's perfect, where all this fine-tuning could not have possibly just happened randomly. And then tonight we're going to talk about how did life get here. Even if we have a beginning of the universe, even if we have all these perfect numerical values for so many things for life to exist, well, how did life start? Next slide. 16-year-old Johnny came down from his bedroom and stumbled into the kitchen to get a bowl of his favorite cereal, alphabets. When he got to the table, he was surprised to see that the cereal box was knocked over and the alphabet letters spelled out, "Take out the garbage," signed Mom. That's what was written with his alphabet cereal on the table. But recalling a recent high school biology lesson, Johnny didn't attribute the message to his mom. After all, he'd just been taught that life itself is merely a product of mindless natural laws. If that's the case, Johnny thought, why couldn't a simple message like "Take out the garbage, Mom" be the product of a mindless natural laws as well? Maybe the cat knocked over the box, or an earthquake shook the house, or no sense in jumping to conclusions. Johnny didn't want to take out the garbage anyway. He didn't have time for house chores. This was summer vacation, and he wanted to get to the beach, and Mary, the girl he liked, would be at the beach. And so he ignored that message and just said, that probably just happened. The cat knocked over the box, and it just spelled out, "Take out the garbage, Mom." We laugh, but that's what's being taught. If we ever get a hold of the absurdity of what they're teaching people, it will anger us, and it should anger us. There should be a righteous indignation rise up in us that says, you know what? You want to teach this, you go get a church somewhere, and you get people to come to your church, but you don't take my taxpayer dollars and do this. But sadly, we have let it go on so long now. I think it's because we just thought, that'll never affect us. But I'm telling you, there are countless thousands upon thousands of kids who have left Christianity because they went to college. It's epidemic in our country. We're a more atheistic country than ever because of these teachings. That's why it's so important we learn what's going on. Since Mary, the girl he loved, also liked the boy named Scott, Johnny wanted to get to the beach early. He tried to meet Scott there, but when Johnny arrived, he saw Mary and Scott walking hand in hand along the shores, and as he followed them at a distance, he looked down and saw a heart drawn in the sand with the words, "Mary loves Scott." See that? Mary loves Scott, written in the sand, scrawled inside. For a moment, Johnny felt his heart sink, but thoughts of his biology class rescued him from deep despair. Maybe this is just another cause and another case of natural laws at work. He thought, perhaps a crab come up here and did this, or perhaps the wind blew just right, or the water came up here and naturally caused this to happen. No sense in accepting a conclusion he didn't want to accept. See, naturalism, materialism, same thing. It is the belief that everything comes from natural things. You understand that? When I say naturalism or materialism, it is the belief that everything comes from something that you can see. So he goes on after that, comforted by the fact that the principles he had learned in the biology class could help him avoid the obvious conclusions that he did not want to see. Johnny decided to lie down for a few minutes and get a little sun on the beach side. And as he put his head back on his towel, he noticed a message in the clouds above. And the message said, "Drink Coke." See that? Drink Coke written in the sky. The white puffy letters revealed on the sky blue background. Unusual cloud formation, he thought. Must have been swirling winds, perhaps. Natural forces must have done this. Look there, them clouds say "Drink Coke." It's humorous, but that ought to wake us up to realize This foolish stuff they're teaching is just foolhardy, willfully blind. Next slide. Go back. I want you to understand, when you see a message, take out the garbage mom, you have to be crazy to think that just popped. Mary loves Scott. Those are extremely simple messages. See how short they are? The message is in one cell of your body. There's enough messages in one cell of your body for over 100 Encyclopedia Britannicas. That's in one cell. Willfully blind is what we have. It's willfully blind to suggest that a message like take out the garbage mom or Mary loves Scott are the work of natural laws, yet these conclusions are perfectly consistent with principles taught in most high school and kindergartens, I would say, and college biology classes today. That's where naturalistic biologists dogmatically assert that messages far more complicated than these messages are just the mindless, aimless, random products of natural laws. Naturalist biologists assert that life generated spontaneously from non-living chemicals by natural laws without any intelligent intervention. Such a theory might have seemed plausible in a 19th century scientist who didn't have the technology to investigate the cell and to discover its amazing complexity. But today, this naturalistic theory flies in the face of everything we know about natural laws and biological systems. Next slide. Simple life. There might have been a time when they saw one cell and said, look how small that is. It takes a microscope to see one of them. They're so tiny. That must be where it started. Look how simple it looks. But since 1950s, advanced technology has enabled scientists to discover a tiny world of awesome design and astonishing complexity. At the same time that our telescopes are seeing further into space, our microscopes are seeing deeper into the components of our biology and our life and our cells. Let's consider this so-called simple life. It's a one-celled animal known as an amoeba. Naturalist evolutionists claim that this one-celled amoeba for something or something like it, just one cell, came together by spontaneous generation. In other words, it just happened without any intelligence involved. In a warm little pond somewhere on this very earth, it just happened. According to their theory, all biological life has evolved from the first one-celled amoeba without any guidance whatsoever. Is their theory true? Well, let's put it to the test. The supreme problem for Darwinists is explaining the origin of first life. They love to jump over this question. They want to go straight to what we call macroevolution. In other words, a tree became a monkey, a rock became a tree, and a tree became a monkey, and a monkey became you. That's macroevolution. We'll get to that next week. But they want to jump over this question because they have no idea how this happened. It's a supreme problem for them. It's how we ever got life to start. For unguided, naturalistic macroevolution to be true, there first must be life generated somewhere. And they want it to be generated from non-living chemicals. You can put all the carbon, you can take every element on the periodic table and put it together and swirl it from now to eons, and you'll never get life. Yet that is exactly what life is made of. The first life, indeed any form of life, is by no means simple. This became abundantly clear in 1953 when James Watson and Francis Crick discovered DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, what we call DNA, the chemical that encodes instructions for building and replicating all living things. Every cell in your body right now has DNA that is telling it where to be, who to hook up with, and what to do. Aren't you glad your eye cells are not down on your toes and your toe cells are not up in your eyes? there's information that tells that cell where it's supposed to be. And those cells die off, and they have to constantly be replicating new cells to replace themselves. This is amazing. DNA has a helical structure. Discovered in 1953, this encoding instruction for building and replicating all living things, what we call proteins. Go to the next slide for me. This is DNA. We got right there, you probably can't read it. You got adenine, thymine, guanine, and cytosine. Those are the 4 different components that hook up inside of DNA to determine what the protein is that it is encoding for. Are you with me? And these chains are usually at least 400 to 500 carts long. And how that arrangement arranges up determines what that protein is going to do. And they want you and they want everybody to believe this just accidentally happens. It's laughable. DNA has a helical structure that looks like a twisted ladder. As you can see here, the sides of the letter are formed by alternating deoxyribose and phosphates molecules, and the rungs of the letter consist of a specific order of 4 nitrogen bases: adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine, often just lettered by A, T, C, and G. These letters comprise what is known as the 4-letter genetic alphabet. This alphabet is identical to our English alphabet in terms of its ability to communicate a message. The specific order of A, T, C, and G within the living cell determines the unique genetic makeup of that living cell. It's called, go to the next slide for me. It's called specified complexity. Specified complexity means something that has a billion, quadrillion different ways it could do. It's amazingly complex, but then it's ordered exactly right. A specified complexity. Are y'all with me? Not only is it complex, but it also contains a specific message. The incredible specified complexity of life becomes obvious when one considers the message found in the DNA of a one-celled amoeba, a creature so small that several hundred could be lined up in 1 inch. It's so small. You can't see it with your naked eye. You have to have a microscope to see it. Darwinist Richard Dawkins, who by no means is trying to push creation, he's a Darwinist. He admits that the message found in just the cell nucleus of a tiny amoeba is more than 30 volumes of the Encyclopedia Britannica combined. That's just in the nucleus. And the entire amoeba has as much information in its DNA as 1,000 complete sets of the Encyclopedia Britannica. Brothers and sisters, that's not simple life. That's amazing. Man. These 1,000 encyclopedias do not consist of random letters, but of letters in a very specific order. If simple messages, and we were laughing a few minutes ago, but think about this. If simple messages like take out the garbage, mom, can't be formed by a box of cereal falling over. If simple messages like Mary loves Scott can't just accidentally happen on a beachside. If simple messages like short, like drink Coke, 2 words, could not just happen in the clouds, why in the world would anybody believe that a message accumulative to 1,000 encyclopedias long could just spontaneously happen? Even the Darwinists say it's that long. Are you with me? The following fact is obvious but often overlooked. Can you go to the next slide for me? Parental uniformity with there in a minute. No human observed the origin of life. No one saw the first life. For us, it is faith. But let me tell you something. For an evolutionist, it is also faith. That's why I harp on this so much, but people just don't see it. That when they say we need to get religion out of the science class, you need to agree with them and say, we sure do. Who saw the first life? Let's say, well, you didn't. That's right, we didn't. Did you see it? No, but we got a theory. That's called religion. We both got a theory. We both got a religion. If we can't directly observe the past, especially the beginning of life, then what scientific principles can we use to help discover what caused first life? We can use what's called forensic principles, and this is called the principle of uniformity. What it means is we assume the same natural laws and processes that operate in the universe today have always operated in the universe the same way, because we have no reason to assume anything else. Are you with me? It's the principle of uniformity. The principle of uniformity, we assume that everything that we see today works just like it did in the past. So if take out the garbage mom requires an intelligent cause today, then we would assume it recalls an intelligent cause 100 years ago. Conversely, if natural laws can do the job today, then the principle of uniformity would lead us to conclude that natural laws could do the job in the past. But when we see the Encyclopedia Britannica, nobody thinks, man, we had a bad storm and all these books fell out. Nobody believes that could happen today. But they want you to believe it could happen 1 billion years ago. We'll get to that in a minute. Consider the Grand Canyon. Next slide for me. Principle of uniformity. It takes intelligence to write a message today. Why would we assume it happened spontaneously in the past? Keep going for me. Next slide. Thank you. See the Grand Canyon there and Mount Rushmore on the other side. The Grand Canyon, what caused it? Did anyone see it form? No. But maybe they did, but they didn't write about it. But by the principle of uniformity, that everything is the same as always has been, we can conclude that natural processes, particularly water erosion, caused the Grand Canyon. We can see it happening today. But look at Mount Rushmore right there. Wow, that's pretty complex. What caused Mount Rushmore? The faces on Mount, the presidential faces. Erosion couldn't have done that. That's just common sense. Since we never observed natural laws chiseling a highly detailed sculpture of presidents' heads on the stones on the mountains now in the present, why in the world we think it could happen 1 billion years ago? Today we see only intelligent beings creating detailed sculptures as Mount Rushmore. As a result, we rightly conclude that in the past, only an intelligent being, a sculptor, could have created the faces on Mount Rushmore. Can you imagine trying to convince somebody, we just had a really bad storm come through here, and look at those faces? We laugh about that, but that is what they are teaching in biology. Something natural just happened, and we got all this complex information. When we look at the first one-celled amoeba, first life, they say, the principle of uniformity tells us that only an intelligent cause could assemble an equivalent of 1,000 encyclopedias of information. Natural laws never have been observed to create a simple message, even like Diet Coke. Natural laws have never written anything anywhere, much less encyclopedias. Spontaneous generation of life. Go to the next slide for me. Spontaneous generation of life has never been observed. Now here, this is true. They've never seen something that was dead come alive. It's never been observed. But they'll turn around and say, well, yeah, but you Christians have never seen life start either. Right, we haven't. We have a religion. So do you. When you call their hand, you got it. And maybe, possibly, see, a lot of people, you can't go and give them a Bible study. They don't believe in the Bible. But if you can ever get them to understand what they do believe, it's not reasonable. It's never been observed. But it's their doctrine. One of the most fundamental observations in all of science has been that life arises only from similar existing life. Scientists have been unable to combine chemicals in a test tube and arrive at a DNA molecule, much less life. And they've tried many times. They have not only failed to make DNA, but also suffer from the illegitimate application of intelligence. Imagine scientists intelligent people contrive experiments where they can try to get life to begin. But think about it. Even if they were to succeed in a laboratory and put enough chemicals together and life happened, that would not prove spontaneous generation. That would prove that you have to be very intelligent to get life to begin. That's what we believe. Something really intelligent started life. Are you with me? The evidence is clear. Next slide. Richard Dawkins. The evidence is very clear. On the first page of Richard Dawkins' book, The Blind Watchmaker, here's what he says. Biology is the study of complicated things that give the appearance of having been designed for a purpose. It's not that they can't see it, it's that they won't see it. It's there. They just are saying, I just don't see nothing. I can't see it. Did y'all get that? That is incredible. He said that. It gives the appearance of having been designed for a purpose. Well, yeah. The eye seems to be designed for sight. The ears seem to be designed for sound. It's amazing. The mouth seems to be designed for taste. Had all these systems. Your liver seems to be designed to clean your blood. Your heart seems to be designed to pump. Look at all this design. It's just everywhere. You look. And all this design comes from proteins that are hooked together that all have to do the same job. Well, I would think, yeah, it kind of does look like it was designed. But you notice he says it gives the appearance, but we don't want to dare say it actually is designed. 2 pages later, despite acknowledging this in the same book, he said the intricate architecture and precision engineering in human life and in each of the trillions of cells within the human body, Dawkins flatly denies that human life or any other life has been designed. It just kind of looks like it has. In other words, Dawkins, who is a scientist, refuses to allow observation to interfere with his conclusions. Brothers and sisters, science is based on observation. That's what you call bad science. Next slide. This guy here, Francis Crick, he's one of the co-discoverers of DNA. He said this. He's an evolutionist too. He's an ardent Darwinist. He said this. He warns. Here's his warning. Biologists must constantly keep in mind that what they see was not designed, but rather evolved. What? You got to keep reminding yourself this wasn't designed? Yeah, because every time you look at it, you go, oh, that's designed. No, it can't be designed. That's what you call, I refuse to see the evidence. It's not that there is no evidence. There's overwhelming evidence. Are y'all with me? Philip Johnson from the Intelligent Design Movement said this about this statement. He said, Darwinian biologists must keep repeating that reminder to themselves because otherwise they might become conscious of the reality that is staring them in the face and trying to get their attention. Time you see something looks designed, remind yourself that can't be designed. See, if you eliminate God as a possible answer, then you'll always come up with an answer that's not God. The complexity of DNA is not the only problem for Darwinists. Its origin is also a problem. Go to the next slide for me. I want you to get this. Here's DNA. How did we get DNA? I ask you the question, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Here's the problem they got with DNA. You ready? How did we get this? DNA relies on proteins for its production, but proteins rely on DNA for their production. How did we get DNA? Proteins. Well, how do we get proteins? DNA. Well, how do you get that started? We have an answer. God. They don't. One must already exist for the other to be made. Their preconceived ideology, and I'd call it religion, their preconceived religion called naturalism or materialism, And when I refer to naturalism or materialism, they're the same kind of the same concept. Both of them simply teach that everything comes from things you can see. This prevents them from even considering an intelligent cause. This is what's called bad science. Next slide. The creation evolution debate is not, everybody say not, about religion versus science. I want you to know they desperately want it to be about religion versus science. They desperately want to call their science, and they desperately want to call yours religion. If you fall for that, you've already lost. It is about good science versus bad science. It is about reasonable faith versus unreasonable faith. If you observe a system like the eyeball and you are determined to say it's not designed, you're just doing bad science. Observation tells you otherwise. It's not about intelligent design. It's not intelligent design versus natural. It's between good science and bad science. Between good faith and bad faith, because both have faith. They do not want to admit they have faith, but they do. Matter of fact, they have a lot of faith. It basically goes like this. Here comes those crazy religious fundamentalists again. And they want to impose their dogmatic religion and ignore objective science. What they like to say. The creation evolution debate is not about religion versus science or the Bible versus science. If they ever say you don't believe in science, say, oh, yeah, I absolutely believe in science. Good science, observable science. When I look at an eyeball, I think that's designed. When you look at an eyeball, you think carbon and hydrogen got together and made it happen. What I'd like to know is, where'd you get carbon and hydrogen? It's about good science versus bad. It's about reasonable versus unreasonable faith. Science is a search for causes. There are only two types of causes that we know of, intelligent and non-intelligent. Non-intelligent, but what I mean by that is natural. It happened without God. The Grand Canyon, remember that picture of the Grand Canyon? The Grand Canyon had a natural cause, and Mount Rushmore, with the faces of presidents, had an intelligent cause. On the question of first life, Darwinists like Dawkins and Crick, who we quoted tonight, rule out intelligent causes before they even look at the evidence. Before they even look at the evidence, they already have decided God cannot be allowed to be an answer. Spontaneous generation by natural laws must be the cause of life because they consider no other option viable. That's called bad science. Evolutionists provide no evidence to support spontaneous generation because there is none. It's never been observed. There's no way to ever do it. But they say it's just so because life exists. And since life exists, and since intelligent causes are ruled out in advance, then it has to be spontaneous generation. Well, yeah, if you demand the answer cannot be God, you're left with the wrong answer. The evidence is so strong for intelligence. Don't you get this? It's fixing to get good right here. The evidence is so strong for intelligence and against naturalism. I hope you know what I mean when I say that now. That prominent evolutionists have actually suggested aliens deposited the first life here. I mean, they're getting some crazy conspiracy theories now because they realize, man, this spontaneous generation thing is just stupid. Fred Hull, he's an evolutionist. All right. Here's what an evolutionist, Fred Hull, said. He invented this far out theory called panspermia. It means seeds everywhere. After calculating that the probability of life arising by spontaneous generation was effectively zero, he said, well, there must have been some aliens come by. I gave him a little bit of credit. At least he realizes something intelligent had to cause this intelligence. I mean, think about it. Can you imagine going to school and you're going to learn something and they set a rock in front of you and say, get to teaching them? I mean, a rock can't tell you what a rock don't know. How's a rock going to tell a protein how to be designed? It don't know how to tell a protein how to be designed. The only way you can get intelligence is you got to have intelligence. Are y'all with me? As crazy as this series, I mean, even think about it, though. Okay, we got aliens come by, and they're starting off all this life. Well, got a question for you. Who made the aliens? As crazy as it sounds, at least panspermia advocates recognizing that some kind of intelligence must be behind this amazing intelligence we see. Darwinists are acting on blind faith when it comes to spontaneous generation. The emergence of life from a primordial soup on the earth, and this is what they teach in textbooks. This aggravates me to no end. Because, brothers and sisters, this is called doctrine. If the school taught your child Buddhism, you'd be up there saying, don't you teach my child that. But when they put science on top of it, I hate to say this, but I'm going to say it. We have fallen for it for so long till it's just become, well, we just have to let it happen. And it's doctrine. The worst church in America is in the schools. This emergence of life from a primordial soup. Your great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather was a bowl of soup. This is just merely an article of faith that scientists are finding difficult to shed. There are no experimental evidence to support it. That's why I question, why in the world is it in a science book? I thought you didn't want religion in a science book. Microbiologist Michael Denton, who also is an atheist, by the way. Notice all these guys I'm quoting are atheists. They're not here to try to promote Christianity or Christ. They're atheists, but they tell on themselves. He said the complexity of the simplest known type of cell is so great that it is impossible to accept that such an object could have been thrown together suddenly by some kind of freakish, vastly improbable event. Such an occurrence would be indistinguishable from a miracle. Well, I thought you didn't believe in miracles. Honey, a rock making the information in DNA would be miraculous. Who do you think is practicing the bad science? The people derisively called religious fanatics, that'd be us, are the enlightened ones, the atheists and Darwinists, who are really just as religious as we are. Dogmatic. They're so religious that when they look at something that's designed, they say, that's not designed. That's a lot of faith right there now. Scientist Herbert Yockey said this: the belief that life on Earth arose spontaneously from non-living matter is simply a matter of faith and strict reductionism, and is based entirely on ideology. In other words, if you believe in spontaneous generation, you have faith. That's religion. Please get the religion out of the science class. Somebody say amen. Darwinists falsely believe they can reduce life from its non-living chemical components because we know our bodies are made up of chemical components. That's the ideal of reductionism. But they've tried it over and over and over again, and they put all kinds of chemicals together, and they stir them, and they heat them, and they do all kinds of stuff with them, and they can't get it ever to come alive. There's a reason. God breathed the breath of life. But that answer is not allowed. But life is clearly more than chemicals. It is chemicals, that is true, but it's more than chemicals. Life contains a message called DNA that is expressed in chemicals, but those chemicals cannot cause the message any more than the chemicals of ink in a pen and the paper on the table can write its own sentence. When there is a message, any message, it is strong evidence, direct evidence that someone gave the message. And when you look at the smallest cell in the human body, there's 100 Encyclopedia Britannicas in there. And you want to tell me that message just spontaneously happened? You just got a lot more faith than me. Honey, when I see Coke drink Coke in the sky. I think somebody did it. So by blind allegiance to this naturalistic reductionist ideology, which is against all observation and reason, Darwinists dogmatically assert that life arose spontaneously from non-living chemical components, allowing their ideology, their religion, to override observation and any reason. Creationist and intelligent design proponents are simply making rational inferences from the evidence that is before us. They are the ones who are making the unrational things. Philip Johnson said this. He points out that their Darwinism is based on what's called a priori commitment to materialism, not on a philosophical neutral assessment of the evidence. In other words, when they go in looking at anything, they already have decided before they look at the evidence, God could not have done it. Well, gee, you'll never come up with God like that. Yeah. Next slide. All right. We'll get there in just a second. Are y'all with me? Dawkins himself has acknowledged, Dawkins is the evolutionist, he's acknowledged the bias. He said this, our philosophical commitment to materialism and reductionism is true. But I would prefer to characterize it as philosophical commitment to a real explanation as opposed to a complete lack of explanation, which is what you have. Oh, we don't have an explanation. You know why we don't have an explanation? Because you won't allow God to be the answer. Darwinist Richard Luton of Harvard University said this. He said, our willingness to accept scientific claims that are against common sense. Did you catch that? Our willingness to accept scientific claims, not evidence, claims that are against common sense is the key to an understanding of the real struggle between science and the supernatural. Now, when they say supernatural, they're not just talking about what we call God. They're just talking about anything outside of nature. Because we have a priori commitment to materialism. In other words, we are biased going in. Well, gee, if you're biased, you're going to always get the result you want. He goes on to say, we are forced by our a priori adherence to material causes to create an apparatus of investigation and a set of concepts that produce material explanations, no matter how counterintuitive. That means stupid. No matter how stupid, no matter how mystifying to the uninitiated. In other words, the people we think are dumb. We tell people that don't have a college education that rocks did this. And if they don't believe us, we say, well, you're just dumb. No, I would say you're dumb. You really have to be educated to believe this nonsense. Moreover, that materialism is absolute. Here's his final thought. You ready? Moreover, that materialism that we believe in is absolute, for we cannot allow a divine foot in the door. It's not that we cannot find God. It's that we refuse to allow God to be. The real truth is that Darwinists have defined science in such a way that the only possible answer is Darwinism. The bottom line is this: the event required to get an atheistic theory of macroevolution, which we'll discuss next week, off the ground is spontaneous generation of life, of the first life. It's believed because of their bias. False science is bad science. And it's the Darwinists who are practicing it. Their belief in spontaneous generation results from their blind faith in naturalism. It takes tremendous faith to believe that the first one-celled creature came together by natural laws, because that is like believing that 1,000 Encyclopedia Britannicas came together by an explosion in a printing shop. We just don't have enough faith to believe that. Are you with me? Now, Darwinists say this: give time more time, and give chance a chance. Well, let's look at these. All right, are y'all with me? Okay. All right. Darwinists, they say, give it several billion years, and eventually we'll get life. Now, is that plausible? Think about this with me, all right? Remember Mount Rushmore? Well, if we gave Mount Rushmore, we'll say, give it 10 years of just natural storms and winds and whatever is in the natural environment. If we gave it 10 years, would we ever get the faces of Mount Rushmore? No, of course not. Well, maybe natural laws would do it if we gave them 1,000,000,000 years. No, they wouldn't. Why? Because nature never orders things. All nature does is disorder things. Have you noticed your house is falling down? Your body is falling down? All nature does is disorder. There's actually a law in science for that. It's called the second law of thermodynamics. Nature does not order things. It disorders things. Cancer is a disorder of your DNA. Give it more time, it's going to improve. Well, then why, when we give it time, it's getting worse and worse all the time? Nature does not order things. It disorders things. Let's suppose you throw red, white, and blue confetti out of an airplane at 1,000 feet above your house. What is the chance it's going to form an American flag on your front lawn? You say, but wait. Give it more time. Okay. Well, let's go up to 10,000 feet. And now let's throw out that confetti at 10,000 feet. We're going to give it more time. We're going to let natural laws do more work on that confetti. Does this improve the probability that a flag will form on your lawn? Absolutely not. Matter of fact, it makes it much worse. More time actually makes the flag less likely because natural laws have longer to work on that confetti and make more disorder and more randomization. Giving something more time is the worst idea you could have. Give it more time. Why? So natural laws can make it worse? Well, give chance a chance, they'll say. Can all the incredible specified complexity just in one cell in life be explained by chance? Not a chance. Michael Behe has said that the probability of getting one protein molecule, we discussed this a few weeks ago, just getting one protein molecule, which has about 100 amino acids, the simplest of protein molecules, getting one of those by chance would be the same as a blindfolded man finding one marked grain of sand in the Sahara Desert and doing it 3 times in a row. That's the chance of producing one protein in your body by chance. Now, here's the thing. One protein molecule is not life. To get life, you would need to get about 200 of them protein molecules together in the right place. Who's the absurd one? Hope you're getting the chance. Everybody say chance. Chance is a person's name, but chance is not a cause. When they say give it a chance, say, well, chance is not a cause. It's not. Chance is a word that we use to describe mathematical possibilities. If someone flips a fair coin in the air, what's the chance it will come up heads? 50%, we say. Yes, but what causes it to come up heads? Is it chance? No, actually, it's not chance at all. The primary cause is an intelligent being who decided to flip the coin at a certain amount of velocity into the air and a certain rotation. You don't think about that, but that's exactly what happens. That's the primary cause. An intelligent being flips the coin, and it goes so high, and it comes down. The secondary cause outside of his hands is physical forces. Wind and gravity all begin to do their part. It's actually not chance at all. If we knew all these variables, we could calculate how the flip would turn out before we ever flipped the coin. If we knew every single variable, not chance. But since we don't know the variables, we use the word chance to cover our ignorance. Guess what evolutionists are doing? They're using the word chance to cover their ignorance. Chance is not a cause. If they don't know how life began, they should just admit they don't know, rather than suggesting spontaneous generation. and it's just a chance. That's a powerless word that isn't a cause at all. Chance is a word for bad science. Are y'all with me? Next slide. Why is materialism false? We're almost done. Y'all hold on a little bit longer. Unfortunately, Darwinists have been successful in convincing the public at large, and sadly, even churches, that the only bad science is that which disagrees with Darwinism. That's what they call bad science. Hope I've showed you very clearly tonight the bad science is what they got. The exact opposite is true. It is Darwinists who are practicing bad science. It is their secular religion of naturalism that leads them to ignore the empirical, observed, detectable evidence for design, that they even admit it looks like it's been designed. Oh, but by the way, remind yourself it hadn't. It's bad religion. Bad religion results in bad science. If scientists assume beforehand that only natural causes are possible, then probably no amount of evidence will convince him or her that intelligence created the first one-celled amoeba or any other design entity, because they refuse to let that be a possibility. No wonder they come up with Darwinism. Now, I want you to get this point. Everybody say, I'm with you. Try to get this point across. It's going to be kind of rough. Science doesn't say anything. Scientists do. Science doesn't talk. Scientists talk. It's very important. When these scientists let their personal preferences or unproven philosophies and religious assumptions dictate their interpretations of the evidence, they do exactly what they accuse religious people of doing. They let their religion dictate their conclusions. Now, when you talk to some of these scientists, what they like to do is say, well, all the known scientists today agree with Darwinism. Number one, that's not true. Number two, it doesn't matter. If all of them refuse to allow God in the classroom, of course they all agree with Darwinism. They're not allowed any other answer, because many of them have been fired from their college jobs. You can find this on Google. They've been lost their jobs because they begin to teach creationism. And they get grants from governments because they teach Darwinism. There's money involved in this. And they love to point and say, well, yeah, everybody believes like we do. Well, now, wait a minute. There was a day when most scientists, if not all scientists, believed the earth was flat. Did that make the earth flat? No, it made scientists wrong. So don't ever fall for this ploy of, you're by yourself. No, actually, I'm not. There's a whole bunch of scientists that agree with us, but they're ridiculed and maligned and made fun of for it. What we need is a backbone. This is why majority opinion does not matter. But most every time you talk to somebody who's an evolutionist or Darwinist, they're going to say, well, everybody agrees with me. Number one, that's not true. Number two, that doesn't matter. We're not here to decide what everybody agrees on. We're here to look at evidence. If everybody agreed the oceans were made out of iron and sulfur, that wouldn't mean the oceans were made out of iron and sulfur. Go down there and take you a bowl of it out. You'll find there's hydrogen and oxygen in there. That's evidence. Y'all with me? Some of you are probably thinking I'm just wasting your time. I'm really not. I wish every church in America would teach this kind of stuff. Here's why, because every school in America is teaching it. Most every school. Why are they teaching it? Because it's in the science books. And this is what's so devastating. When they put it in a science book, young minds are taught first thing in science. The first thing they're taught in science is everything in this science book is facts. And so when their little mind gets over to evolution, they're already programmed to think this is the truth. Well, now, wait a minute. If this is the truth, then what my preacher's teaching is not true. The bad science of Darwinism results in the false philosophy of naturalism and materialism, that everything that we have comes from something that we can see. Why is materialism wrong? I got 5 points here for you. You ready? Number one, specified complexity for information. In other words, we have encyclopedias in each cell of our body that tell it what to do. How does carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen do that? They can't do it. How does just dead materials write encyclopedias? They can't. They don't. There's a message resident in life, technically called specified complexity, that cannot be explained by materialism. Number two, human thoughts and theories are not comprised only of materials. Some thoughts, whether they be of love or hate, they're not chemicals. Think about this. How much does love weigh? I mean, if love is a material, let's weigh it. We can weigh all the chemicals. Can't weigh love. What is the chemical composition of hate? If it's just a material, it's not. These are absurd questions because thoughts, convictions, and emotions are not completely material based. Since they are not completely material based, materialism is false. Yes, there are materials, but there is something beyond materials. Number three, if life were nothing more than materials, then we'd be able to take all the materials of life, which are the same materials found in the dirt, and make a living being, but we cannot do it, and they're trying. There's clearly something beyond materials. Number four, if materialism is true, then everyone in all of human history who has ever had any kind of spiritual experience is just being deceived. That their spiritual experience is everywhere. See, if just one spiritual experience is real, then materialism is false. Last, if materialism is true, then reason itself is impossible. If materialism is true, there's no way that we can even communicate. Can't have reason. Reason is not a chemical. We can't even talk to each other. If everything's just, I mean, does carbon have reason? Which one has reason? For if mental processes are nothing but chemical reactions in the brain, then there is no reason to believe anything you believe is true. Chemicals can't evaluate whether or not a theory is true. Chemicals don't reason, they only react. We know that. So there's got to be something beyond chemicals for us to even have reason and logic. Our ability to reason can come from one of two places. They arise from pre-existing intelligence, or they arise from mindless matter. Again, I go back to the theory. If you have intelligence, did a rock that has no intelligence give that to you? How can it? How can something that doesn't have any intelligence give you any intelligence? That's absurd. But a God who knows all things, he could give you intelligence. The fact that we have reason says there's a God. The atheists, the Darwinists, the materialists believe by faith that our minds arose from mindless matter without intelligent intervention. It contradicts all scientific observation, which demonstrates that an effect cannot be greater than its cause. You can't give what you haven't got. Yet materialists believe that dead, unintelligent matter has produced intelligent life. It makes much more sense to believe that the human mind is made in the image of a great mind called God. Materialism can't explain reason any more than it can explain life. Therefore, I don't have enough faith to be a materialist. Next slide. The definition of personhood. This is a little story. I'll close with this. Pete Bacano is his name. During a curriculum meeting for the state of Georgia's Department of Education, they were deciding what to put in the textbooks, and he got on their board, which we really need to pray that God will start putting Christians on city councils and mayors and everywhere. I just read the other day, I don't know if this is true or not, I hadn't verified it, but somebody posted that there was like 90 Muslims that are running for offices in America. I assure you, if they get control, they're not going to just say all religions are okay. How do you know that? Observation. In the countries that are prominently Muslims, all religions are not okay. So we better hit our knees and say, God, please give us leaders. Even if they're not Pentecostals, it'll make them give us Christian leaders. Oh, we're just going to talk in tongues and have church. Well, we're in trouble. I believe in talking in tongues and having church, but we better realize there's a battle going on. This guy, Pete Bacano, he got on this council, and he was part of a Christian ministry, but he didn't tell them that he was part of a Christian ministry because he didn't want any bias against him. And he's sitting across from a lady who's an atheist, and the guy at the head of the council says, "Well, what do you do for a living, sir?" And he said, "Well, I'm trying to think of the word he said. I'm a critical thinking consultant." That's what it was. And the guy said, "Well, what's a critical thinking consultant?" He said, "Well, just hang on. During the process of us deciding textbook, you'll know what I am." And they begin to discuss what's in the textbooks, and they come to psychology, and Pete notices there's no standard for personhood in there. So he says, I'd like to allow, if you would, I'd like to put this into our psychology textbook as the definition for personhood." Watch this. You ready? Number one, what makes a person? Intellect and conceptual thought. Number two, freedom of choice and free will. Number three, ethical responsibility and standards. Number four, moral accountability and obligations. Number five, inalienable rights. And when he did this, the lady across him, who was an atheist, raised her hand and began to refute not wanting this in the textbooks. Why? Because ain't none of that materials. What makes you you is a lot more than hydrogen and carbon and oxygen. And as she raised her hand, he said, I'd like to say one more thing before I close. He said, if anyone were to disagree with this standard that I have just given you that you can see on the board, number one, the person would be engaging in a conceptual thought. That proves number one. He said, number two, that person would be exercising his or her freedom to do so. That proves number two. He said, number three, that person must think that there is an ethical responsibility to teach what is right. That proves number three. He said, in number four, that person is seeking to hold me morally accountable to teach the truth. That proves number four. Number five, he said, that person has the right to disagree with my position. That proves number five. He said, in other words, if anybody disagrees with this position, by disagreeing with it, they're proving it. And the head of the table said, I know why you're a critical thought consultant now. And they put that in the Georgia textbooks. With a little critical thinking, we see that Darwinian worldview collapses, not only from the lack of evidence, but also because Darwinists must borrow from theistic worldview as they attempt to make their case. Intellect, free will, objective morality, and human rights, as well as reason, logic, design, and truth, can exist only if God exists. You cannot get those things from chemicals. So when they begin to reason against God, they're using something that proves God. Reason. Where'd you get that reason? Well, carbon and oxygen got together and gave it to me. Somebody say, praise the Lord. Even in our Declaration of Independence, it says we hold these truths to be self-evident. We hold these truths to be self-evident. It's obvious. The only way you can't see it is if you decide to not see it. As they themselves acknowledged, they discovered many pieces to the puzzle that clearly appears by their own words to be intelligently designed, precisely designed from the universe to the single cell. Everything is designed. The designer, the evidence shows that he has already designed this awesome universe with amazing complexity and precision. When we see biological systems that even Darwinists like Richard Darwin recognize give the appearance of having been designed for a purpose, maybe we ought to conclude that they really were designed for a purpose. But when they rule out that possibility, clearly their science is bad science. Close with this. Next slide. Should be the last slide. Is there one more or not? There you go. All right. Life does not consist merely of chemicals. Does it consist of chemicals? Yes, but not merely of chemicals. Your brain has chemicals in it, but your thoughts are immaterial. They're not chemicals. Life clearly consists of more than chemicals. It also includes specified complexity. In other words, information which only comes from a mind. There are no known natural laws that create specified complexity in information. It's never seen happened. Even take out the garbage mom. Nobody would believe that that could happen by knocking over a bowl of cereal. But that's exactly what's being taught. The simplest life contains amazing complexity in a specified order. Einstein said it like this. He said, God doesn't play dice with the universe. But a guy named Philip come along and said, his name was Philip Gold. He said, no, God doesn't play dice with the universe, but he does play Scrabble. Think about that. He wrote messages everywhere. Every cell in your body's got messages from God in it. Darwinists philosophically rule out intelligent cause before they even look at the evidence. Despite observing and recognizing the obvious signs of design, they assert that their cause must be natural, and that is why they're wrong. We don't have to be afraid to talk to them. Hopefully we can meet somebody and help them. I met two girls in cricket just the other day. I'd hope they'd be here tonight. They're not here. But I met two girls in cricket going to get my phone, a new phone, because I jumped in the lake with my old one and it went dead. And we began to talk about different things, and I got into different schooling things. And I said, well, you know, they teach evolution in there. I said, do you realize? And I said, evolution is the doctrine of atheism. Both of them just kind of looked, and then one of them said, you know, that's right. They never even think about this stuff. I said, it's the doctrine. And I began to explain some of these things to them. They were like, wow. There's so much false doctrine in these science classes, it's unbelievable. Let's stand. I'm hoping, if it's possible, Sister Hurst, that we can get these classes all in that one little folder. I would appreciate if that's possible. Then later on, if somebody wants to go back and look at them, they can. But why don't we just pray and ask the Lord to send